There's a tree growing in almost every state east of the Rocky Mountains that produces up to 150 pounds of protein-rich nuts every single year. It lives for 250 years. It fertilizes itself, fights off pests without a single spray, and for 4,000 years Native American tribes from the Cherokee to the Iroquois built their food systems around it. Then, over the course of a single century, Americans were told to cut it down. The U.S. Department of Agriculture warned homeowners about it. County extension offices printed pamphlets telling people not to plant anything near it. Landscapers refused to work around it. Suburban subdivisions wrote it into their covenants as a prohibited species. Millions of mature trees were removed. Millions more were prevented from ever being planted. The tree is the eastern black walnut, and almost everything you have been told about why you should not have one is either exaggerated or completely false. In the next 15 minutes, I am going to show you what this tree actually does, what Native American tribes understood about it that modern America forgot, and why a single mature black walnut standing in your backyard right now may be worth more than your car. The black walnut is not a new tree. Archaeological sites across the eastern United States contain black walnut shells going back at least 4,000 years. The Cherokee, the Iroquois, the Shawnee, the Lenape, every major woodland tribe east of the Mississippi used it. They ate the nuts rolled, ground them into a flour that could be stored for years, and pressed them for oil. 1 pound of black walnut kernel contains roughly 24% protein. By dry weight, that is more protein than beef. A family with 3 mature trees could produce enough protein in a single fall to supplement their diet through an entire winter. But the nuts were only the beginning. The green husks that cover the nut when it falls were used as a natural dye. Boiling the husks produced the deep brown ink and a permanent fabric dye that pioneers, early settlers, and later Confederate soldiers used to color their uniforms when imported ink and dye became impossible to get during the Civil War. The same husks, when crushed and thrown into slow-moving streams, released the chemical that temporarily stunned fish, bringing them to the surface, where they could be gathered by hand. This was a documented Native American fishing technique, practiced from the Carolinas to the Great Lakes. The wood itself was something else entirely. Black walnut heartwood is dark brown, tight-grained, and exceptionally resistant to decay. Early American settlers built fence posts from it that are still standing today, 170 years later, in the same soil where they were driven into the ground. Confederate armorers chose black walnut for rifle stocks because it was strong, shock-resistant, and would not split when a bullet was fired. The tree gave food, medicine, dye, fishing bait, and lumber, all from a single species that required no planting, no fertilizing, and no irrigation. It simply grew wherever a squirrel buried a nut and forgot about it. So what happened? The first thing that happened was a scientific discovery that was turned into a marketing campaign. In 1856, a French chemist isolated a compound from the black walnut and named it juglone. In 1881, another scientist noticed that certain plants refused to grow near black walnut trees, and juglone was identified as the cause. In 1921, a study in Virginia documented that tomato plants planted close to black walnuts wilted and died. This was real. The chemistry was real. Juglone is a genuine compound, and it does suppress the growth of certain specific plants. But the scientific finding was not a warning. It was an observation about a small number of sensitive species. The plants that juglone actually affects are surprisingly few. Tomatoes, potatoes, apples, blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, a short list of mostly European cultivars that modern American landscaping happens to rely on heavily. That is why, when county extension offices in the 1930s and 40s began publishing advice for homeowners. The message got simplified. Do not plant near black walnuts. Nothing grows under them. Remove the tree if you want a garden. The truth is that more than 200 common plants grow perfectly well in the presence of juglone. Native American tribes knew this intuitively. Elderberry thrives near black walnut. So do pawpaws, black raspberry, currants. Most aliens, including garlic and onions, squash, melons, beans, sunflowers, raspberries, and dozens of native wildflowers. Indigenous agriculture was built on polycultures, different species planted together, each one compensating for what the others could not do. Black walnut was a cornerstone species in those systems, not the poison tree. The problem was not the walnut. The problem was that 20th century American gardens decided the only vegetables worth growing with a small number that happened to be juglone sensitive. But the bad reputation stuck. Homeowners removed their walnut trees. Developers stopped planting them. Landscape architects recommended against them. An entire generation of Americans grew up believing that the most productive native tree on the continent was a nuisance. And every time a mature walnut tree came down, somebody made money cutting it. Because what most people did not realize, and what the timber industry did not go out of its way to explain, was what the wood was actually worth. In 1978, a couple returned home from a holiday to find that a 95-foot black walnut tree had been cut down and removed from their property while they were away. The tree had been valued at over $28,000 in timber. Forestry officials were called in. DNA testing of wood samples eventually identified which sawmill had processed it. The case became one of the earliest documented examples of what foresters now called walnut rustling, the organized theft of mature black walnut trees from private property, state forests, and even cemeteries. These are not isolated incidents. In Missouri, a man was sentenced to federal prison after stealing black walnut trees worth more than $120,000 from private land. In Indiana, illegal cutting of walnuts from public forest land became serious enough that the U.S. Forest Service began tracking it as a specific crime. In Pennsylvania, multiple theft cases have involved mature walnut trees taken from rural properties, sometimes at night, sometimes using helicopters to airlift entire trunks out of remote forests. The reason is economics. A single grade A veneer log from a mature walnut can sell for $1,400 in stumpage value, meaning the price paid to the landowner before the log is even cut. The same log, milled into lumber and sold retail, can bring between $7 and $25 per board foot. A single mature tree in 2025 can easily be worth between $5,000 and $40,000. And exceptional specimens have sold for far more. Which brings us to a quiet fact that almost no suburban homeowner has ever been told. If you have a mature black walnut tree on your property, not a sapling, not a 10-year-old stripling, but a genuinely mature tree with a straight trunk and at least 30 inches of diameter, you are standing next to a legacy asset that is appreciating faster than most of the stock market. Trees in the ground gain value every year. Each additional inch of diameter can double the tree's board foot value. A 30-inch walnut left alone for another 20 years becomes a 50-inch walnut, and the price jump is not linear, it is exponential. Hammond's Products Company in Stockton, Missouri, is the only large-scale commercial processor of black walnut nuts in America. They source almost everything they sell from wild trees. Most of those wild trees are on private land, in backyards, in pastures, in farm woodlots. Every fall, hundreds of thousands of Americans collect black walnuts from their own properties, drop them off at Hammond's buying stations, and receive payment in cash. The nuts become ice cream, baking ingredients, and specialty foods sold in grocery stores. A small but steady supplemental income drawn from a tree that grew itself. Native American tribes understood something that modern America has only recently begun to recover. A single mature black walnut is not an isolated asset. It is a complete system. It feeds your family. It produces medicine in it. The husks contain compounds with documented antifungal and antiparasitic properties, which is why black walnut hull tincture still appears in herbal pharmacies today. It produces natural dye and ink. It provides shade. It creates wildlife habitat for squirrels, deer, turkeys, and songbirds. It pulls calcium from deep in the soil and drops it on the surface every autumn through its leaves, improving the fertility of everything juglone tolerant that grows around it. And while it is doing all of that, it is appreciating in dollar value every single year. It remains standard. So what do you do with this information? If you already have a mature black walnut on your property, the first thing you do is nothing. Do not cut it. Do not prune it heavily. Do not let the tree service tell you it needs to come down because it is messy or because nothing will grow under it. Learn which plants actually thrive in its presence and plant those instead. Under a mature walnut, you can grow elderberry bushes, currants, pawpaws, black raspberry, Jerusalem artichoke, most palliums, squash, beans, and dozens of wildflowers and native grasses. Think about what Native American polycultures actually looked like, not a single crop in a single bed, but layers of plants using different parts of the same soil. If you are planning to plant one, the best time was 20 years ago. The second best time is this fall. Black walnut seedlings can be planted directly from seed in the fall after the first frost. Drop a whole nut into 2 inches of loose soil, cover, and walk away. Germination rates for fresh black walnut seeds are above 70%, with no special treatment required. Squirrels have been planting this tree for 10,000 years without any help, and they have an excellent success rate. Give the seedling full sun, deep fertile soil, and at least 40 feet of space in every direction if you want it to reach full size. A tree planted today will produce its first nuts in 7 to 10 years. It will reach meaningful timber value in 40 to 50 years. It will outlive you, your children, and your grandchildren. The green husks stain everything they touch a deep black brown. You will need gloves. The shells are harder than almost any other nut in North America, which is why industrial black walnut processors use mechanical crackers the size of small cars. For home use, a simple heavy-duty nutcracker or even a brick and a hammer will work, but expect the process to be slow and messy. This is the price of admission. It is also the reason commercial growers prefer the English walnut. Softer shells, more kernel, easier to process. English walnut became the supermarket nut. Black walnut was left behind. But the flavor is different, and anyone who has tasted real black walnut ice cream, or black walnut pie, or black walnut stuffing at Thanksgiving knows what the commercial market sacrifice. Black walnut has a deeper, earthier, almost wine-like flavor that most other nuts cannot match. For 2 centuries, it was the defining flavor of American baking east of the Mississippi. Grandmothers kept jars of it in their kitchens. Diners served it in pies. Ice cream parlors made it the signature flavor of autumn. That tradition did not die because the tree failed. It faded because a generation of Americans decided that convenience was worth more than flavor, and supermarkets followed the decision. Nothing about that decision was permanent. You can plant a black walnut tree tomorrow. You can protect the one already growing in your yard. You can teach your children that the messy tree-dropping green bulls on the driveway in October is actually producing more protein per acre than most cultivated crops. You can harvest those nuts, cure them for 3 weeks in a dry shed, crack them in the winter by the fireplace, and taste something that your great-great-grandparents considered ordinary food, and that almost no one eats today. And if that tree stays in the ground for another 50 years, growing straight and quiet and unnoticed, it becomes something else as well. It becomes a timber asset that may be worth more than your house. It becomes a bank account that compounds at the rate of wood laying down rings. A grade A veneer quality black walnut is rarer than gold, and the market for it is global. Furniture makers in Italy and Japan and Germany pay premium prices for American black walnut logs. Every single tree that reaches maturity represents value that Americans used to understand and then somehow agreed to forget. Native American tribes built civilizations around this tree. Early American settlers depended on it. Confederate soldiers fought with rifles stocked in it. And then, in the space of 2 generations, it was redefined from a cornerstone species to a nuisance. Not because the tree changed, because we did. Somewhere within 100 miles of where you are sitting right now, there is a mature black walnut tree growing quietly on someone's property. Its owner probably thinks of it as a problem, as a mess, as something that kills tomatoes. They do not know what they have. Now, you do. If this video changed the way you look at the tree in your backyard, hit subscribe. We dig up one of these buried pieces of American self-sufficiency every week. Stories the corporations forgot, the extension offices oversimplified, and the old-timers kept alive. There is a link in the description to the full self-sufficient backyard blueprint if you want to take this further. The harvest begins now.